camera. I'll keep my microphone on just because I look goofy when I look at these videos when I'm not speaking. I look goofy when I'm speaking, but so Arsene, it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, hello everyone. My name is Arsene Boundaone. You pronounce it as a combination of the letter R and Sen as in senator. It's a French name, so there's an accent in the middle E that we don't have in English. I am from West Africa, particularly Burkina Faso, which is smack dab in the middle of West Africa between Mali and Ghana. And we're a French-speaking country, and I moved to the US in 2015, and since then I have gotten MBA, PMP, have worked project coordination, some part-time, and now I am back in school in Texas. I used to live in Chicago. I moved to Texas with my wife, and I am looking to get a certification in data science with a boot camp called CodeUp, and it's super heavy. It's super heavy. That's one of the reasons I didn't really have time to like gather some information real quick in a slide. But your professor was gracious enough to give me kind of a framework, and then I'm gonna work around that. So this is a little bit about myself. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna leave the questions open. Like if you want to ask questions about like me right now, you can do it, and then we'll move on to like the next step. And the next step is probably going to be me talking about my experience as a project manager in nonprofits and in Africa. If anybody has any question about my background or where I'm headed and why I'm taking CodeUp, or the reason why I'm taking CodeUp is because I'm moving from nonprofit management to more technical type of management, and I needed the programming and deep statistical tools to do that. All right, if there are no questions, I'll move forward with my experience as a project manager with nonprofits and in Africa. So project management in nonprofits are pretty similar to project management in for-profit. So the similarities are essentially, I don't know since when the class started, but you've probably heard of the three constraints of time, budget, and quality. So those constraints usually remain when you're in project management in nonprofit. There sometimes, depending on the type of nonprofit that you are running or that you are managing, those constraints may be lower or higher. In my experience, I've worked with two nonprofit, one in Africa and one here in the US in Chicago. And for one of them in Africa, I had a lot of resources, and the constraints weren't as much the cost and quality than the cost and quality rather than the time. So we had more of a time constraint then, but we didn't have problems with resources. But here in Chicago, when I was a project manager, project coordinator, I had all of the constraints: time, resources, quality. yeah, it was really difficult, and that is what is common to all projects. Now, the difference that you can find in nonprofit is the deliverables. So, in terms of deliverables, we usually talk about if you're in construction, you have a building, you have a bridge, you have a road. If you're let's say in a technical field, you have an app, or you have any kind of deliverable that is a product, an object, or something that the client or the user can use or manipulate or handle. But usually in nonprofit, it's more of a quality of life thing. You want to reduce certain things, or you want to increase certain things that are in the quality of people's lives. And that, I think, personally, is the main difference between nonprofits and for-profits management. I don't know if there are any questions about that, the difference between project management in for-profit and nonprofit.
Do you typically see a difference in timelines between the two? Would you say there's one where things are more constrained by time than the other?
I have found that in the nonprofits that I worked in, it was time was handled differently. Like I said, in Burkina, time was my biggest constraint, but for different reasons than in a for-profit. I only had 2 experiences, but not as a project manager, but I've seen people who manage our activities. And I think the time constraint has different reasons. In the nonprofit, it's mainly for, it mainly depends on the type of activity that you were running. In Burkina, for example, certain activities, we couldn't do them during the raining season because we have the mousson in West Africa. So we would do them, we would pack a lot of activities in that time frame, the dry season. In Chicago, it was more, the nonprofit I was working with was about, there were 2 of them. There was one that was an after-school program, and the other one was a government program that helped undocumented children. For the undocumented children, it was essentially because of the fact that they needed to get to their parents by a certain time. But in a business, like I personally had a business in Burkina Faso that I started. Time is money. That's money is the main issue there. If you waste time on certain material or on the supply part of things, or in the manufacturing part of things, we were manufacturing specialized gift for upscale clients. So if you waste time, it's money that you're wasting. But in nonprofit, it's, if you waste time, you are running against quality parameters. I think it's more of a difference of reason than the amount of time. There is always going to be a constraint of time, whether you're in nonprofit or in for-profit. But the difference, I think, is the reason why people want to rush you. And this leads me to talk about one thing that I learned when I was studying for PMP, is that the best question to ask a client about a project is, why do you want to do this? Because sometimes people want to do certain things for the wrong reason, and that leads you to a much more constraint than if you found another way to do it by finding another reason. So if that makes sense. Yeah. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Another question about
Arsene,
yes.
Yes. My question is around what you just spoke of. Have you ever had to tell a client that you wouldn't do a project because it wasn't right? They chose a project, they chose you to manage the product, but after you did your research, you found out it wasn't the right project for what the client was asking for.
So yes and no. I had to say no, but I wasn't exactly a project manager. I was a case manager running, working with a project, and one of the project manager assigned a specific project to me. So I was basically a project manager, and I had to say no because they had a time constraint with our stakeholders, which were like the government and some agencies that had like specific rules about how we should run that project. And after I did a perimeter check of the facility and checked out all the issues that were there and how we could handle the problem, I was like, no, we can't execute your plan the way you did because I checked everything and it's not, the numbers don't add up. We would need more time and we would need more information about the facility and then about the number of children that we're going to have in the future, and we don't have those. So I told her I couldn't do it, and she was a little bit pissed, but she kind of admitted that I was right, and then she had to go back to deal with the stakeholders. I was glad I didn't have to deal with that. Yeah.
So that's part of what you mentioned at the beginning, the triple constraints of time,
Yes.
budget, and resources.
Yes. 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 They're gonna be always there, no matter the type of project, whether it's nonprofit or for profit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right. If there are no other questions about difference between nonprofit and for-profit project management, I'll talk about my experience in Burkina Faso and then move on to talk about tips and tricks and war stories, like Professor Gabor likes to call them. So my first experience as a project manager was in Burkina Faso, back in my country, and it was with a business called, an organization called Compassion International. So it's a US-based organization. It's Christian. And what they do is they find sponsors in developed countries that would sponsor children in difficult situations in developing countries. And that is in South America, Africa, South Asia, Central Asia, whatever the need was. And the project I was running had probably around 200. When I was leaving, we had 255 children because I did the last recruitment of children before I left. So I still remember that number. And we went from, when I was there, we went from 195 and 197 to 255, which means the project was running well, and we were able to recruit more clients, more children to serve. So we basically help them. I'm not going to use like technical terms. I'm just going to use everyday terms. We basically help them with school fees, health fees, health bills. We gave them like practical training for anything that they thought was useful. We even like took ideas from the children. Like we gathered them, we say, oh, what do you want to learn? And then they would say, oh, I want to learn this, I want to learn this. And then I would go back to the partners and say, okay, this is a budget for this type of things that they want to learn. And then if they were convinced enough, and it was on me to make that they're convinced. So I had to gather like information from the children, make a budget, plan, and have all like the information that I needed to convince them. And we had a lot of resources because people genuinely want to help children. So when they can, they would send money, and we would use that to do projects for the children, and we would send reports back. The main issues that I used to have was that headquarters would hear projects implemented in other parts of the world, and they would want to do the same somewhere else. So they would just send us information and say, okay, we want you to run this thing like next month, when you had your whole year planned and you had to fit that in the schedule. And that was really hard. But I learned a lot from that experience, because that's when I learned how to hire people, how to train them depending on the type of job that I needed them to perform, how to make people collaborate. So, and that is one of the most important things about a project manager, is that you need to know your people. And to know your people, you need to spend time with them, not just during work, but outside of work. And when I realized that, I wasn't even like formally a project manager, like with the PMI degree, PMI certificate and all, but I knew that I needed to be close to those people. And I moved from across the capital, because it was in the capital. I moved from one neighborhood to the other, so I can be in the same neighborhood, so we could do things together. Because, you know, I was the project manager, and my whole life was kind of centered to that. And that was one of the best things that I learned then, is that I need to know my people. And we ended up being really good friends, and we still email each other and you know, checking on each other until now. That experience lasted 2 years. At the beginning, it was a little difficult, because the person who was before me, he basically embezzled money because he was running a 1-month show, and he basically had you normally need 4 other people plus the project manager to run those projects, and he didn't have an accountant, so he ended up being the accountant and the project manager. And you see how that's a conflict of interest. And so I was basically hired to kind of like turn things around, and we had to like let him go, because he wouldn't collaborate with all the things that we wanted to do, and he would like refuse to give certain informations, because of course there was a problem with it. And I didn't encourage any lawsuits against him. It wasn't my response. I don't know if at that time I didn't think it was my responsibility, but I could have done it. But I knew the guy, so I didn't want to engage in that. So I let it. I kind of like referred that to my my board members, and they took care of that. So I didn't have a personal conflict of interest with that person. So I had to work on turnarounds, and that is an important phase that I went through, because it helped me know what kind of questions to ask. Because when you're a project manager, usually people put you in front of things, and you just have to deal with it. And the first thing to do is not to run with it. If you get into a project and people give you stuff and you go, okay, this is what you need to do, please don't run with it. Go back and say, okay, why do you want to do this? Why is this like that? And ask questions and understand exactly why people want to do things, how they wanted to do it before you start doing things. Because otherwise, if you run with people's idea, it's not going to be your idea, but you're going to be judged on that, because you accepted the project, you accepted the work. So that was one of the best experience that I had from that. I'm kind of like getting into the tips and tricks, but yeah, that was my experience with Compassion International. I had a supervisor who was strict but fair, and then I had another one who was less strict, which was helpful, because it gives you more room to work with things. I don't know what other information could be useful. it ended in good terms, although it was really hard at some point because we didn't have an accountant for a certain time, so I had to do that job, and I had to do I had to manage a project, and to keep myself accountable, I had to constantly send reports so that people know what's happening, so that they know, okay, I'm not doing the same thing as the other guy. But it turns out okay, and yeah, it was a good experience. Is there any questions about project management, my experience with Compassion International? Oh, one thing that I wanted to add is that project management is starting to grow in West Africa. From what I know, it's already big in like English-speaking countries in Africa, but in French-speaking countries, it wasn't that big, and it's starting to grow. So we don't have the same experiences as in English-speaking countries. So if you hear other things from like Nigerian and Ghanaian and Kenyan people, it's probably because of that. Yes, questions?
I was just going to ask, so when you were like, I want to say letting the guy go and all that, because it was a conflict of interest, you weren't trying to collab with anybody on the team. So just my question was like, so how did you guys go about that process? Like, how did you guys identify it? How did you guys escalate that to like the decision makers or the stakeholders of the team?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I made some mistakes back then, and then it came back to bite me towards the end of my stay there. So there was no procedure for that because it hadn't happened, I should say, to that scale and with so many people knowing about it, because there's always like little problems, but usually people were able to handle it at a local level. So when I came in, the previous project manager became the accountant now. So I would ask him to give me like a report of things, and then the reports would be messy and not accurate. And then I would go around the facility and look at what is present and what is not present. And he would say like, we would have this number of things. And then I would go, and then it wasn't there. I think maybe he didn't think I was gonna go and verify for myself, but I did. And I ended up talking to the board president about it, because I talked to him and he wouldn't be upfront with me, even though we knew each other. So I went to the board, and then I told them that I found some inconsistencies and we would need to have a meeting to talk about it. And I don't know why, but it seems like the board was kind of afraid to shake things up, because maybe they fear that it would kind of like make a bad name for the center. But I kept talking about it until they did something. But my problem is that when that happened, I did not put by writing that we don't have. I put by writing that we don't have an accountant anymore, but I didn't formally request a replacement, because to me, it was obvious. And second, I wasn't used to the forms and all the procedures there. And it wasn't something that was clearly enunciated in the forms that I had at the center. It's only later that I discovered that. So I had to work 9 months as the accountant, as I was trying to push people to hire somebody else. And that kind of like made things really hard for me. And also the board, I never knew why they didn't want to shake things up and go after the guy, but it seemed like they didn't want to make a bad name for the center. That's my conclusion. But yeah, that's what happened. And I decided at the end that everything that I did, and I decided with my supervisor, I put it in writing and I sent an email with it. Yep. That was the lesson.
No, that works. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other question?
I got a few. I was
Okay.
taking some notes while you're doing it. I said, what kinds of tools did you have for project management? A corporation is going to give you clouds, server space, and a Microsoft project, and lots of administrative support to do that. Did you have the same on this project, or was it all in a notebook you were carrying around?
So, yeah, that's a really good question. Back in Burkina, we had Excel. That's what we had. And even when I joined the center, the accounting was still done on paper books. So you had like this huge ledger that was like this big. I can't even fit it in the screen. I don't know if you can see it. It was this big. And you had to carry it like a old black ledger where people wrote everything and then they did all the counts. It was painful. So part of the fight that I had with other project managers, because there were several other centers there, part of the fight that we had was to ask them to give us more tools that were easier to use and faster as well. So that was my experience back in Burkina. But here in Chicago, it was much easier because people were already into those things. And I even towards the end of the, sorry, not towards the end, at the beginning of the coordinating project that I had, I implemented so because it was COVID, we had to go online, and they had so many tools that the Chicago School Department was using CPS, yeah, Chicago Public School, yes, because we work with Chicago Public School. Chicago Public School were using different tools than the schools were using, than our organization was using, and some of the parents didn't even have like computers for the children. So we had to get the hardware, but also find a way to synchronize the software. And that was my first kind of technical project management. And that I was doing my MBA at that time. And that's what pushed me actually to kind of like look into technical project management. And then I went for coding. So yes, sometimes you have the tools, sometimes you don't, but you need to really know what tools you need and see what's the next step. If I have these tools, what's the next step? If I don't have these tools, what's the next steps?
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. And maybe in Chicago too, but in Africa, did you have to deal with and manage around corrupt officials?
Not with Compassion International.
Good.
So Compassion International, because they're Christian, they're kind of like pretty strict about integrity, and most of people, other problems were in Compassion International, but not corruption. That from what I knew, there wasn't that. But when I had to interact with suppliers, then people would come to me and say, we've got this for you. It's like the African way. We've got this for you. That maybe it will help you in your day-to-day life. But it's implied that I'm bringing you this so that you think of me when you're going to make a choice. But Compassion has like strict policies. You can't take a gift over this amount. Otherwise, there's no even you have to report it. You can't take it at all. So that was helpful in managing things. And my teammates agreed with me, and we never had a problem with it.
Okay.
But corruption is present in like with suppliers and official
government officials, import export kinds of.
Yeah. We didn't have to deal with import export too much because most of our things that we need for supply were like provided by people who were importing it, and then we were going to them and say, okay, we need this, and then they would like supply it. But when I came in, there was no system to handle that at all. So the guy who was there before me, he was just like, say, you just pick whoever would give him the most money, basically. So we had to go through create procedures, because kind of some Compassion International kind of let the centers have their own organization so that they don't like weigh in too much. But that leads to problems like these. So we had to like come up with like structures. But fortunately, I had a little bit of experience in terms of market, or what is it called in English? When you ask for offers from
Bids.
Thank you.
Bids.
Sorry, French is yeah, bids. So I had, because I studied law actually. So I had experience with bids, how to organize them, and how the law structured them. So that helped me.
Fantastic. The third question is, as a project manager, did you have to rely more on influence or authority?
Definitely influence. And that's probably because of my personality. I am more of a cool, I'm kind of like a cool guy. I don't like conflict too much. So I'd rather try to find a way to see what motivates someone and help them do that than like to be authoritative and say, yeah, you have to do this. But sometimes you do have to kind of like, if somebody is late for something, there's only so much room you can give them before you run out of room. So at some point you gotta like, stick to your guns and kind of weigh in with your authority. It's necessary, but I don't use it often. And when you know your guys, you kind of organize your way in your things in a way that you don't have to do that. I know, for example, I'll talk about all that in the next point, but yeah, it's usually influence. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. If there are no other questions about that, I'm gonna move to helpful tips and tricks and war stories. So the first tip that I have is know your people. It's you talk to people, take people to lunch, coffee, if they have something happening in their lives. If it's not intrusive, ask about it and things like that. In Africa, it's different. Here, people are more private. In Africa, people are more public. So it's easier to bond with people. So, and I'm extroverted, so that was easy for me. I always try to be respectful of people's privacy, but sometimes you just have to find the right way to approach people, even if people are private, because a lot of the job as a project manager depends on how you know people. You don't have to know, how many kids they have or if they're whatever, but I don't know. Ask, do you like chocolate? And then, do you like ice cream, or do you want to get a coffee? Stuff like that. Organizing things outside of work to gather people is a good way to do that. Again, in Africa, it was much easier than here. And we had a lot of affinity. I had a lot of affinities with the people I worked with. And all my collaborators all but one were extroverted. So it was much easier for me. And then I had like probably around 26, 30 volunteers that I had to meet every week. And it's not easy to know all of these people, but if you spend like 1 hour every week with them in a meeting, well, after like 2-3 months, you're gonna know them more than you think, and that's a really good thing. Another thing that I already said is don't run with things. When you offer the project or when you offer the task, don't just take it and run with it. Ask questions to make sure you understand what the person wants. And a good way that I found to to understand what somebody wants, whether it's in class, like when I'm taking the programming class, is to restate what you think you understood to the person. You can say something like, if I understood well, you want me to do this, 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 or you said this is this and this led to this. And then you see if you and the person agree. It's simple, but it's very effective in understanding what somebody meant. A third one, oh, that's more of a war story. So the person I came to replace, like I said, he was kind of siphoning money out of the center, and the way I knew it was to check the books myself, and that is a very good thing to do if you're in charge of something particular. Check things yourself as much as you can. Not because you don't trust people, but because certain things are sensitive, like money. And if you're in charge of money, if somebody does it, check the work yourself. Not because you don't trust them, because people can make mistakes. In my case, it wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. But because I took the time to go through the books, and I kind of knew a little bit what was going on, because the board, the president of the board was somebody that I knew, and it was a pastor that I knew from a sister church where I was. So I approached him, and I kind of got some information, and that's how relationship helped me, back in Burkina. But here, I don't know if it would work, but you can always try. But yeah, try to check things yourself, especially things that are really important, some things that affect money, deadlines, or the amount of certain resources. Yeah. So I'm gonna try to talk quickly about my path to getting the PMP, and then it would be opened. I think I can still do 10. I can even go 15 minutes, because I'm already ready for my next meeting, so I can spend more time. So any questions about tricks, tips, and war stories?
You place a lot of emphasis on your team. Have you ever
Yeah.
made a mistake in whom you hired, and how did you recover from it?
In all the jobs as a project manager or project coordinator that I had, I don't think I've ever hired somebody that I wasn't satisfied with. Technical side, that's easy. That's easy to know. The person can do the thing or they can't do the thing. That's easy. Personality wise, I'd say I've been, at the beginning, I was lucky. Or I believe in God, I would say God helped me. Because the accountant that I ended up hiring was a fantastic lady, and she did a great job. The volunteers that I ended up hiring were great. A couple, there's always the 20-80% rule works with hiring. Yes. So the 20% of the 80% of your problems are going to come from 20% of people you hired. So yeah, you can't say that you're going to have like a perfect hiring system, especially when you're new to the job. But like in terms of techniques to hire, I don't think I made mistakes. Where I made mistakes were probably around like people's personality, where like maybe I didn't put enough time into writing down questions that would make certain traits come up. But when you're new, it's really difficult. All those things I discovered them when I took top grading for the MBA. So there are things that you just don't know. So you don't know what you don't know. But thankfully, I didn't make any like grave mistakes that ended up really ruining a project. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right, I'll move forward with my path to PMP. So if you want to get the PMP from the PMI, it's great. There's also Prince 2 that is from the United Kingdom. They're great as well. Both are fantastic. I would say the best way is to start now as your student because they give discounts to students, and that really helped me. That kind of like removed probably $500 of the price of the membership and the the test. They're costly when you do them as a professional. So if you can. Uh, Apply now, and then they get you in as a student with a discount, and then you can apply for the PMP as a student and you get the discount. And also, I'm not making Honey's commercials or publicity, but they're really great. When I was trying to apply for the certification, I had Honey on my Chrome as a Chrome extension. And the Honey, it's an application, by the way. It's an extension that you can use to find like
Discount
I don't know,
codes.
discounts and things like that. And I used Honey, and it got me like really great discounts on the PMP exam. So yeah, so that's my first tip about getting the PMP. It's better to get the PMP when you're a member of the PMI. When I look back, it was a good idea to get into the PMI, PMI before I get the PMP, because it helped me have like an insider look of the organization. I can go to the website and then check out things without the restriction of not being a member. So that was helpful. PMP is really useful, especially in the technical field. I had a little bit of trouble with the jobs that I wanted because I didn't have the technical background, because I wanted to go to tech. This is why I'm taking the coding class right now. But when you have a PMP, it opens up a lot of doors, and there's a lot of people, a lot of companies who would like you to have a PMP or a Prince 2 certification for that matter. So it's useful. It's very useful. And PMI, I don't know if that's true, but according to the statistics, people who have a PMI have a bump in the next 5 years of 30% in their salary. So, just to incentivize you. As a PMI member, you get a lot of discounts. You get a lot of help with connections. When I got here in San Antonio, I was able to join the chapter, and then after a month, I started volunteering, and then maybe 2 weeks later, somebody offered me a job, but I couldn't take it because I was going back to school. But they told me, when you're done, check me out and see if you're still interested. So they're really active, particularly here in Chicago, in San Antonio. I don't know about Chicago, San Francisco, California. They're really active too. They have a program, a mentorship program that we are trying to emulate. So if you plan on going to San Francisco, or if you are from there, check them out. Getting ready for the exam. It's a really hard exam. It's a 4-hour proctored exam. You can't have your phone. You can only take one break, I think. And even the breaks are well regulated. Like, you can't take a break and then come back to the same questions. When you come back from the break, it's questions that you haven't seen, of course. It's a difficult exam. It's not something to take lightly. There is a lot of resources. I did it without paying for courses, but that's because I didn't have a lot of money saved. So I had to work hard, and it worked out, thank God. But if you can join a class, work on it, because it's costly and you don't want to take it twice. Because when you take it the second time, you have to pay again. So there are a lot of resources online. If you Google it, I can quickly check out one of them so that I have a name for you. Just give me 30 seconds. It's called EDU HubSpot. And they have an app that is really good. You can use that to do like some to run the questions that would come to the PMP exam. The guy who owns it, he's really good. I like the way he organized the website, the app. It got better over time. At the beginning, when I joined the app, that was 10 months ago. It had like bugs, but over time they were able to fix a lot of bugs. So now it's running much better because I still use it just to keep in shape. Yeah. So get ready. And also one tip is to schedule the exam if you want to take the PMP to be to have the certificate. Schedule the exam before you start studying. It may seem counterintuitive, but it works because it makes you study because you know it's coming. But if you don't schedule it, you always like push things. You always procrastinate. And I found it useful when I decided to just schedule it and then start studying. But don't schedule it too close. Schedule it like I don't know, 2 or 3 months away. That gives you time to get ready. And also contact people who have done it before so that they give you tips and kind of like guide you through the learning process. Because I wish I knew certain things before I went to the exam that would have made my work so much easier, or certain aspects. For example, focus on Agile, because Agile is big right now, and even PMP is turning towards Agile. So that would be like one thing to know. That is good. I think that is what I could say quickly about joining PMI, getting ready for the exam, and the exam itself. I know it's not a lot, but since we don't have too much time, that's what I can say before I leave, time for questions about the PMP, and even why you should be a project manager or seek the exam. Question time.
It's up to you guys if you want to ask some questions. If not, we can definitely let Arsene go.
Yes.
Arsene, I want to thank you for your time. I had a couple of classes when you were going through your MBA here at North Park. I don't know if you remember, we were on a couple of teams together. So glad you for your success and the things that you accomplished.
Thanks, Colby. Thanks. I do remember. And thank you guys for your time. It was nice to share all of this, and I'm glad Prof. Gavor thought of me. I've always been fond of him, and he knows.
Well, it's a
So I'm glad he
mutual
thought of me.
admiration. And I appreciate you and on short notice stepping in to help out because, they're probably sick of hearing from me every week.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
You're
but
pretty
it's good to-
fun professor to be with.
So I appreciate it. Keep in touch, Arsene. Let me know how it goes, and
Awesome.
look forward to hearing all the great things you're up to once you finish this last round of training.
Yes. Thank you, Professor.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arsene.
Thank you, Arsene.
Thanks, Anton.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording.